Rian Kutsia speaking to you from Pretoria, Fortis Proactive Defense Solutions. And today we are specifically discussing personal safety during outdoor activities and adventures. And I'm talking to Mark Human from NDW Training. And Mark, and I knew I'm going to lose the last part, so I'm going to leave that in your hands. Based in Cape Town, a good friend, and as far as I'm concerned, one of the top trainers in South Africa. And he's a guy with a lot of hands-on knowledge. So if you are in any way into these activities, make sure you take a good listen to what follows next. Mark, good morning. And if you can maybe just repeat that intro that I bungled.
No, good morning, Rian. I'm Mark from MDW, which stands for Multidimensional Warriors. And then our corporate side of our business is called Personal Safety. So pretty simple to remember. And yeah, very happy to see you guys again, and always happy to be with you guys.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for your time. I appreciate that. So Cape Town and the Western Cape as such, where you guys are based, is obviously a haven for all sorts of outdoor activities, hiking, nature trails, there's mountain biking, rock climbing, trail running is very good, very big. I actually follow one or two social media influencers who do trail running, more for the scenery than anything else, if I'm honest. But, you know, so I see the problems there where a lady goes running all by herself up there in the mountains. There are a lot of potential problems. So, and then obviously the whole Cape area is filled with scenic spots, lookout points where you can stop and get out of your car. It even has some of the most scenic parking areas that you will see in your life. So when we're talking about nature trails and rock climbing and stuff, there are ever-increasing reports of attacks by criminals on hikers, on Table Mountain, etc. You hear about this all the time. What would you say is, firstly, the most overlooked safety precaution in general that people could apply that may or may not significantly reduce their risk of becoming a crime statistic?
Okay, I think it's a very tough question because everything influences it. It compounds each other. But I think one big thing is very much information. Checking your areas, your routes before the time. There's a lot of groups that people belong to, so we kind of know when there are trends happening in the area that you're going. So those social media groups or WhatsApp groups or whatever that are linked to, get on them and find out what the trends are happening in those areas. And that's quite a lot of information is available over there, and you'll know what's happening on Table Mountain 2 weeks before if there was a mugging on the mountain or if something was happening in silver mines. So they're very informative. And then from there, the next important thing is your route planning. What the way you plan your activity, how you think where you're going to park. You spoke about parking. That's always a critical thing, because it's not only you that's at risk, it's also your goods that are at risk. You know, if you have a car left down there, you need to think how that's going to be taken care of. A lot of the guys will actually park in town in a secure parking area and do a little bit of a down hike to get up to some of the places.
Okay, that makes sense.
At the bottom of Constantia, near the wine farm there's pretty safe parking monitored. So I always try to do that as much as possible. It's not always that easy. Some of the hiking clubs, like out at Wellington, they will actually organize their own car guard for the day.
Okay.
So
yeah,
planning your route, knowing what's going on in the area, knowing the trends, and then obviously your arrival and leaving those areas are also critical.
Okay, so for starters, and I think one can apply this whether you're going rock climbing or hiking or trail running or whatever. Specifically, if you park somewhere where there are people looking after the cars, I think that buys a little bit of peace of mind. It's not necessarily the be-all and end-all, but at least I think it helps, that little bit of presence. So if we're talking mountain bikers, we can talk road cycling as well. You know, I mean, they've got their own dangers in amongst all the cars. Mountain biking at least takes you out of the traffic situation, but they do very frequently find themselves in rather remote areas, which is like far from assistance and not as easy and straightforward to get out of should there be a problem. So how can these people, the biking community, how can they go about trying to minimize the odds getting ambushed out there in the bundus?
Okay, again, there's a bit of a repeat. Your route planning is important. Your arrival and departure is important. But linked to that, you know, the biker is kind of limited to what he can carry. Same with a hiker. Every sport has its limits over there. But you would obviously look at self-defense tools. You would look at communications. Sometimes live tracking. Now, you remember, anytime you have tracking or people that know where you are, for example, a panic button or anything, those are either early warning systems or post-warning systems. They don't help you in the moment of the event. But that's important for any sort of recoveries or anything. And then it's pretty obvious that numbers are always a benefit. Yeah. So we have seen guys in groups of 3 or 4 still getting taken on, but numbers make a big difference. Yeah.
I think it helps if you've got a bigger group, but it's not always feasible or practical to get a bigger group together. So, you know, they have to work with what they've got, but there are risks. When we talk about, you mentioned tools that you can use to defend yourself. I mean, it's very difficult to just defend yourself from the back of a moving bicycle.
Yeah.
So there are limitations to that. Basically, that's you have to try and get away with that. But in order to really defend yourself, if you're in the middle of a situation, you have to be standing still, or preferably, but possibly, have fallen off your bike. What options are they looking at in terms of defending themselves? Potential tools that they can carry, keeping in mind that some of them may be tourists from overseas who are not allowed to carry a firearm. But let's discuss tourists in general. What options can they look at that are viable?
I think just before we get to tools, there's some decisions to make as they go along. And, you know, everyone goes, you're going to follow your natural instinct, and that's fight or flight or whatever. But those decisions need to be made beforehand. And you have to say, in what situation am I going to fight? In what situation may I comply? And how important is that bike? Your bike has a tracker on, it's insured. You know, is that worth fighting for in that moment? Because sometimes you've got to make that decision. And my natural instinct is to want to, you know, someone comes towards me, I want to fight. But there are situations where you put yourself at risk. So not only do you have to train how to fight and defend yourself, you actually, part of that is learning how to comply constructively if that is viable and if that is the choice at the moment. So you have to ask yourself, am I going to comply? Am I going to fight? Am I going to try run? And then you're going to say to yourself, when will I fight? When will I comply? When I run? And you have to make those decisions beforehand. Making it in the moment probably means you're going to end up rolling the dice, and you fight when you shouldn't, or run when you shouldn't. And
yeah, exactly.
That's very important. So the tools linked to that, if you look at the physical tools, there's a whole range of stuff, but it's often limited to what people can carry. There's legislation on some of our trails, so I'm not going to talk too much about that because it's kind of a gray area. So try to stick within the framework of what you're allowed to carry on some of the nature trails. You know, the parks don't want firearms there. So those decisions are quite tight. And then if you do decide to carry something, how are you going to carry it? Because obviously if you're a biker, you can only carry so much with you. You're trying to go as light as possible. So some of the tools that we'll look at, we got simple tools for biking. There would be pepper gas. Some guys would be carrying something like a gas propelled, something like a burner, a tactical baton, all those sorts of things. And each of those has their advantages. So maybe I could just look at pepper gas, you know. Let me get one here. kind of call this one Satan spit. It's branded for us, but if you take pepper gas, people will do something like pepper gas and they won't really understand it. So what I mean by that is there's no training with it. They use it as a silver bullet and they're going to pull that out and spray someone. And case in point, we've had instances where someone sprayed someone and post spraying that person, someone's been stabbed. And then we've had great successes with it as well. So understanding the tool is critical. So if I take something like pepper gas, we're very fortunate in our thing. Sometimes we get to spray 20 people a week if we train the rangers or if we train someone else. And we see all the reactions that come out of this thing. And I can break down a little bit of the reactions we get. We get what we call effective compliance. So if I spray that person, he starts either running or complying with my command, or it gives me space to get away, and it really does its job. We had a very nice instance a little while ago with I think it was a burner on Table Mountains. The tour guide did everything to de-escalate the situation. Didn't happen. So he used a gas ball and the criminal ran away. And to everyone's delight, the criminal fell off the cliff.
Oh, okay.
So in that situation, he had done everything to de-escalate. And the pepper gas served that, or the pepper ball served the purpose very well. We've had another situation where the person sprayed the person and the person went into a fighting rage and actually stabbed the person to death. He did allow his wife to escape, but there may have been a situation where knowing how to comply would have been better. So you've got to know when to use it. And pepper gas, you're either going to get a person who complies, someone who goes into a rage, and sometimes we have a delayed reaction. It's not always what you expect.
Yes.
And then you got to know your tool. You carry this thing on a hiking trail for 2 years and it's exposed to the sun, and you pull it out and it's supposed to give you a 3 to 4 meter range. And you got to know whether it's stream or gas or whatever. And then it just goes a little. And I've been in that situation. Pull this out, think you're going to use it, and it goes trickle. You go, oh shit. So you've got to make sure you understand the pros and cons of this tool and the legalities.
In the legalities, and you got to know what the expiry date is on that tin of pepper gas.
So I don't worry too much about the expiry. It sounds pretty weird, but what I do is I do a function test on my pepper gas. You get about 20 sprays out of the average can, depending on which brand you're going. Whether it's the 100 ml or 50 ml, it's just or 60 ml like this one. It's just the amount that gets sent out. You get about 20 sprays. So about once a month, I just do a function test on this thing, and I know I've spent a spray, and I actually put a little mark on my can. So I know I've got approximately 18 2-second sprays if I've done that twice. But a function test is critical because this thing can be 2 days old and you've left it on your dash while you went hiking. And it was exposed to the sun. Sometimes this kept in the safe is 6 years later. It's actually the propellant that goes off, not the pepper gas.
Not the effectiveness of the actual pepper gas.
Yeah, so something like that, and we go through tools. The other thing is, as a cyclist, your bicycle is actually a barrier. If you know how to dismount, we do some of the companies that do tours, bicycle tours here, so we teach them how to dismount, put the bicycle as a barrier between you and the attacker.
Okay.
So there's some nice skills that can be taught there as well. Driving skill, how to fall, how to recover from falls. It sounds like a silly thing, but you may get pushed off or you may fall while trying to escape. And then using that barrier. And sometimes, like we said, I don't want to ever hand my bicycle over. It's the last thing I want to do naturally. But if someone's pointing a firearm at you and you try to throw your bicycle at him, so there's a time to decide what you're going to give up before the time, what you're prepared to give up and when. And you have to assess each situation. And there's no set rule for me or you.
Exactly. Everyone must do what feels right for you.
That's right. And you have to understand the consequence of each action, and every situation is going to be very volatile. So if someone's trying to take my bike and I'm being held at gunpoint, that's one thing. If they got my bike and they want to continue, and then I realize it's a threat to my personal safety, and then you may need to do some physical action. The other thing is early recognition skills. We'll get back to tools, but seeing something early allows you to access tools earlier, let people know you've observed them. You know, you obviously, it's hard. They set nice ambush points on the mountain then, but if you're aware of those things, the recognition skills are quite important. The earlier you see something, the harder it is to either de-escalate, escape, and sometimes letting them know that you're aware of them, their element of surprise disappears.
Yes. And
yeah,
they pick up on that.
Yeah, they pick up, and body language is very important. So you can sometimes you can try go on the mountain, do an experiment. Please don't do this for real, but not like we would ever do anything like this. But go on the mountain and see if you can get mugged. It's almost impossible. Okay. Because they pick up on that body language as you're running through there.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty certain that you've never done that.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, no. I mean, you would never. I would be shocked.
So anyway. Pepper gas is a good tool, and then you got things like, and you know, these are just tools. Tools are all matched by mindset and decision making and knowing the abilities of it. We know these tactical batons. They're nice. The cyclists carry them within reason. There's a lighter graphite one, so you can get a nice graphite baton. They're a little more expensive, but they obviously using because they want something lighter. These things are caused to create distance, and again, you need to know when you pull this thing out, and a little basic training links to there. And putting these two things together is quite a nice tool. So the problem comes in is where do you carry it? How do you carry it while you're cycling? How do you access it? So there's a lot of things that run in there. Flashlights are great. You sell flashlights. You guys know a lot about flashlights. So even daytime flashlights, early morning hikes, afternoons, we always say try stay in lit conditions, but the reality is winter's coming.
Yep.
4 o'clock, you're coming off the mountain, or you want to do a quick cycle after work, you're going to be doing it in less than ideal lighting conditions. So having a flashlight, but even daytime, these things are good distractions. They're striking tools to carry with. Blades, that's my passion. I like a little punch dagger, easy to carry.
Oh, yeah.
But realize there's a mindset that goes with each of these tools. And then firearms, finally, you know, there's always the controversial firearms. That's the world you're in. That's the world we're in. And how do you carry that? I use badger bag strapped to your body, but carrying this weight for the duration of your 30K cycle adds up pretty quickly. So there's always these things that are linking in there. And then the last tools that I talk about, and this is not for those cyclists, but you will see hiking sticks. We have a nice training session on there, especially if the guys in groups, a group with a nice hiking stick or these sort of things. If they get 2 or 3 assailants, 3 or 4 hikers can do a pretty good job with a little bit of thought process and training on managing distance.
Yes. I think those hiking sticks, because those hiking sticks don't weigh a lot. They're very light.
That's it.
That's even a viable tool for a trail runner. I mean, I get that trail runners, because they run in sometimes rather inhospitable areas, and I can understand that they don't want stuff in their hands that can burden them. But I think something like that, it's lightweight, and it's obviously, you know, that anyone can argue with me about the point, but I think it might just be something that can help you in a situation. The trail
There's always
runner,
you have to compromise one way or another. You're going to have to compromise on how you carry it. If you decide to go without something, you know, the guys that are rock climbing, you know, you got to decide while you're climbing, does your gear stay on you, or does it stay in the bag at the bottom with your friends?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you're going up the rocks, up the mountain, and the less weight you carry with you, obviously, the easier you make your own life. But eventually you get to the top, and you never quite know what you're going to run into there. Specifically, sadly, not in South Africa. It can happen anywhere, anytime. And also, talking about rock climbing, Mark, rock climbers tend to be rather focused. I wanted to use the word fixated, but I think that might be a bit too much. They need to be very focused on the route that they're going to be going up, to see points where they can tether and, you know, hand grips and footholds and stuff. So as you are in the action of actual climbing, you can't really focus on what's going on around
Yeah, I think rock climbing is the extreme of that, but also, that applies to all the other stuff. If you're trail running and you're running down Table Mountain and it's a little wet, or you're running down Silver Mines over here, you've got to concentrate pretty hard. We've had guys slip over the years, so those guys are concentrating on their path. And one of the things we do on advice is scouting the area a little bit before the time for a rock climber. Check the area around before you actually start your activity. Don't just arrive and start. Also, it depends who's climbing with you, and in numbers, you get solo climbers, you get guys that climb together. But if you have the ability to have someone get designated as the lookout guy, that's pretty important.
I think that will help a lot, definitely. With cycling, that becomes a little bit muddy waters again, because you're going a lot faster and you have to focus a lot harder, especially if it's off-road cycling. So I think the basic stuff that people need to keep in mind with whatever you do with all of these more sporty activities is some planning ahead, thinking about it a little bit, just using your mind, applying your mind. What if? It can take you a couple of minutes to do that, but save you a lot of trouble. And then have something on you that if you have to, that you can use to defend yourself.
Yes,
and have a good idea of how to use that.
Maybe getting back to the tools, Rian, you say have something on you. We go back to that, and I've given all nice fancy tools and stuff, but something like a hiking stick is something related to your sport. So you also don't play too much. It's not an extra tool to carry. It fits in with your activity. And, a rock climber will have a carabiner and a piece of rope, know how to use something like that. So the stuff that's related to activities, first of all, it's easier to justify if you're walking around. And secondly, it's not an extra tool. It's something that's related to your activity. So you need to be able to improvise that as a personal defense tool as well.
And after what you said, it would seem that you can now add to your bouquet of potential tools to defend yourself with. We can now even add cliffs to that.
I'm sorry, I missed the cliffs.
I said, no, you remember what you said about the guy who got sprayed with pepper gas and then he ran off the cliff? So adding a cliff to your bouquet of tools that you can use seems to be on the cards now. I suppose one must have more sympathy as a human being, but we have such a crime problem in this country, Mark, that I think everybody's reached a stage where the levels are low.
Yeah, and I think it's a difficult thing to do and go down a rabbit hole where you end up becoming the bad guy. So
yes,
you got to understand that, and there's two things that we've got to function on. One is your value and belief systems, and secondly is the mandate of the law. And we've got to try and align those two things as close as possible within reason.
Yes.
To safety. And there's always a moral issue. There's always a legal issue, and those two things don't always collide in our minds. So we have to try and bring those two things closer and closer together. You have to understand your right to self-defense. You have to understand if you use something like pepper spray, you may be charged with assault. Maybe worse if somebody hits themselves during that process, and you need to be able to justify. So just like your Firearms Control Act, your right for self-defense applies to any of these weapons. So
absolutely,
when the guys are running any other tool, it actually the same. It falls into the same category as what you would learn on the Firearm courses that we teach.
And it helps to be knowledgeable about your rights under the South African law system. And just for the viewers, there will be a video up soon of a conversation I had with Max Rossley, who is a practicing attorney as well in South Africa, about your rights under South African laws and regulations when it comes to personal defense, private defense. And that might be a good listen for you as well. because it's one walking around with the gas on you, but if you can't, for instance, just spray people in the queue in where you're trying to do your groceries purely because somebody's bumped you with a shopping cart. There are definite limits to using these things, and that applies whether you're in town or out there in the bundus. You have to be aware of these things because these things will come and bite you in the backside if you overstep. We have to be the law-abiding citizens. Easy as that.
Yeah. So I think that gets back to the question. It's very easy to say, well, I'm going to overstep, but it's also very easy to hold back too long. And you have to play that what-if game, and you have to understand that mindset. When am I going to take action? Why am I going to take action? And again, those questions, those lines need to be drawn beforehand. When we do training, we do some of the hiking groups, we do some of the guys that do rock climbing up in Wellington over there, and we run through specific scenarios to kind of give them a framework of what they would encounter, and then we'll say, all right, should you have hit him with should the six of you hit him with your hiking pole over there because you got down to the car guard parking lot and he got confrontational because you wouldn't give him a tip,
Yes. There are limits. Let's speak about sightseeing and scenic spots where you can stop somewhere and get out of your car. Over and above the fact that you may be mugged by a chakma baboon, there may also be human predators lurking, and you are vulnerable when you're getting in and out of your vehicle, or when you're standing there admiring the sunset and not necessarily focused on what's going on behind you. What would you say, or again, and we will be repeating because these things need to be repeated, as far as I'm concerned, you can never repeat them enough. What are the basics that one need to keep in mind when you are either in a parking terrain somewhere, approaching your car, leaving your car, or standing on a scenic drive at a lookout point and catching a sunset, in terms of personal safety, in terms of situational awareness, that sort of stuff?
Well, the term situational awareness sums it up. That's what you need. But people don't tell you how to do situational awareness. One of the courses we actually do a 2-day surveillance course, but that applies on how to look, how to think about scanning an area as you're driving up, as you're parking, understand when you're parking, your blind spots on the vehicle, all those sort of things. I know you guys do an anti-hijacking course. We do anti-hijacking courses for companies like BMW or whatever. And one of those things is, as you pull in, everyone always tells you reverse into a parking lot, which makes sense most of the time. But if you reverse and everybody's sitting on the back of your vehicle, it doesn't make sense. So sometimes you not break the norm according to a situation. And one of the things when you're driving up to spaces like that is scanning the area and looking properly. And the problem is we look for the parking lot and we don't scan the area. And also while you're around, as much as we say we're out in nature, we're still stuck down our phones taking photographs of the Atlantic Ocean when you get there. So check the area early, and then check it periodically as well, and then be very careful of getting stuck into your technology. And we say we're out in nature, but everybody's down their phone over there. And we all know.
Problem. I mean, people are out there doing a hiking trail and they're busy on their phones, taking video footage more than enjoying nature. It happens. I've seen it. It's odd, but there you go. We want to get everything on video so we can post it on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, and the thing is, these days with tech, there's nice ways of thinking about it. You can have cameras on your lapel. You can scan. You can have glasses that do that, and you can press play and stuff. So if you're going to be stuck in tech, but if you've got a phone or something, or cameras or those sort of things, and you're going to be stuck down them, make a conscious effort on a timing to do periodic scans and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It needs to become a way of opening vision. Yeah.
Absolutely. Mark, some final thoughts. Reality crime in South African outdoors is specifically for the sake of this conversation. Let's just talk about the most important mindset shift that you think our enthusiasts need to adopt in order to balance safety, personal safety, with the enjoyment of being outdoors in nature.
Okay, I think there's two things you need. Is planning, which we don't go. We just go to a spot, you don't know it. Plan, get information, and that's where our tech is great for us. I mean, go into AI and say what's happening in the area I'm going to. It's pretty easy. Ask what's happening. Know the area and physically know the area. So do a physical map of the area so you understand an environment as opposed to just following your phone. So if you're an outdoors activity, you should have a picture in your head of the area as well. Even if you sat on your phone earlier and see, well, I have a few points that I can identify so I know where I am. That's very important. So that planning and stuff, and then running the what if stuff. If I run into something, what is my action linked to what I may run into? And then the other thing is how to, you got to live the life you want to go. You don't want to not go walking. But if there's obvious stuff, don't go tempt fate as well if you know it's there. So that mindset, we get guys.
You know, there's always a potential. So if you just sort of act accordingly and think accordingly, it can go a long way. If you're going to be out there hiking in the mountain, you are placing yourself. It's easy enough to say to someone, don't go down the dark alleyway after dark. But if you're out there on the mountain hiking, you are effectively in the alleyway after dark. So it's a bit of a moot point for an outdoor enthusiast in that situation, I think. So you need to be aware of that and just sharpen up on everything else that you've mentioned in order to minimize your odds of becoming another crime victim.
Yeah, and then the other thing, I think there's two other things, and now it's not just mindset, but we always go, well, how can I prevent it? That's the first thing I need to say. So how can I prevent something happening? What are the things I can put in place to prevent it happening? Secondly, if it happens, how do I deal with it? And we've spoken about the options that I need to take over there. And finally, if something actually happens, what do I do post-event? And let's not get into a legal thing over there, but what if I'm injured? So am I carrying a small medical kit? What are my communications? Am I in a phone reception? Maybe carry a satellite little button that a criminal wouldn't see you, but that applies to a fall as well. And then, if I'm out of phone reception, at least those sort of things are taken care of. So for guys that are doing outdoor stuff that may be going out of comms, have that post-event stuff. If you fall on the mountain, someone's going to have to extract you. And if you spend a night in winter up in Silver Mines, it doesn't sound that bad, but you can die of exposure pretty easy.
Exactly. So it's good to plan these things in advance. Mark, I think that's the bottom line for me. You can certainly be out there and enjoy everything that's on offer, and there are a lot. But you need to keep your mind out of neutral and think about these things and think about personal safety and do some planning around it and take some precautions. And if you're down in the Cape, do contact Mark at MDW so that you can either go for a bit of a refresher or a half-day course or whatever he's got on offer. He is the guy to help you down there. Make use of it. It's better for you. Mark, thank you so much for your time and sharing some of your expertise with us. I'm looking forward to many more chats with you. All the best and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you. It's beautiful, sunny. We've got a few good ones left here. Let me turn my camera around quickly. You can have the last bit of a record. So there we go. So.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
So, in Cape Town, we don't want to not go outside on days like this because we're scared of shit. So.
Well, exactly. That view does look familiar. It's almost as if I've seen it before.
Exactly. You've got to visit again.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, but you must have a great day.
Stay safe, Rian. Take care.